Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Clint with Fire Pit Sports. We're doing another video. Now, the last video that I dropped, kind of a sports history related, was a what if video. This is a couple weeks ago, what if video on Dr. J and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And it got me thinking about, kind of players from the 70s and the 60s. And I started to think about this. Since 1950, probably the 40s or the 50s, I don't know exactly what date the NBA kind of started, but since that time into 2023, the only two names we see thrown around a lot for the title of the GOAT is LeBron and Michael. And it just kind of upsets me. It doesn't upset me that LeBron and Michael are both considered the greatest of all time. It doesn't upset me that there are a lot of people that think that LeBron's the greatest of all time, or that there are a lot of people that think that Michael's the greatest of all time. I just think there needs to be more names. We're actually doing a disservice to a lot of players that played in the past by not bringing up some of these names from the 60s and 70s that have, and then again, I think in this video, even some of the early 2000s, these guys have legitimate arguments to say they are the greatest basketball player of all time. They're just not brought up. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about 5 players that should be in the GOAT conversation. I didn't put Tim Duncan on the list at first because I was going to go with Shaq. A buddy of mine said Tim Duncan. And as soon as he said that, I went, he's got to be on the list, because you just look at Tim Duncan's career and think that's one of the greatest basketball players we've ever seen. Now, this guy was one of the most consistent winners in history of the NBA. He played on teams that weren't flashy. They didn't bring a lot of big-name free agents. They built teams, as we like to call it. My generation calls it the old-fashioned way. He didn't self-promote. He wasn't in a lot of commercials. You didn't see him out and about. He just won. 1999, in a strike-shortened year, him and David Robinson win the championship. They go to the Western Conference Finals one more time. But from 2002 on, it was Tim Duncan's team. So he was kind of like, I think, the big man version of Kobe Bryant. And in that, yes, he had help. He had Manu Ginobili. He had Tony Parker. You got to have great players around you. He did play under a Hall of Fame coach with Greg Popovich. But he was the man on the team, and they won. Like Kobe, they won. Tim Duncan, in his career, collected 5 rings, but since he was the man, after David Robinson moved on, then Tim Duncan proceeded to go to the Western Conference Finals 8 different times. They lost only 3, so they won 5 Western Conference titles and 4 championships from that. The only loss, of course, was to LeBron's super team in 7 games, the Miami Heat. And the next year, they come back and they beat LeBron's super team in 5 games. Now, you're not going to get terrific stats with Duncan, but you're going to get consistent statistics. He averaged double-digit points and rebounds every year except for the last season of his career. That was a 17-year career. He made it to the All-NBA team 15 times. So you may not have the strongest argument, but he should be put in the conversation.
He thought, and rightfully so, that he was the greatest basketball player that ever lived. Physically, he was still the most imposing physical player that ever played this league, period. There's no one that's come close to him in terms of just physical prowess.
Now, there were 2 elite players in the 60s. One of them was Wilt, and the other was Russell. Wilt clearly had the numbers, while Russell clearly had the championships. It wouldn't be until about 1972 with the Lakers that Wilt would get his first ring. But what defined Wilt Chamberlain was his statistics. He's still the number 1 rebounder of all time, followed by Bill Russell. He was the all-time leading scorer when he retired, and then Kareem passed him. Now he's sitting 6th. He had, arguably, this isn't even an argument, he had the best statistical season of any player in the history of the game. We're talking about the 1961-62 season. In that season, Wilt Chamberlain averaged 50 points a game and 25 rebounds a game. That was the season that he scored 100 points in one game. And something else that people don't really know about that season is that from November of 61 until February of 62, he set the all-time record for consecutive 30, 40, 50, and 60-point games. So during that time, he scored at least 30 points in 65 straight games, at least 40 points in 14 straight games, at least 50 points in 6 straight games, and at least 60 points in 4 straight games. Now, the final game of that 60-point streak was the 100-point game. Also, in that same season, Wilt Chamberlain had 63 40-point games and 45 games where he scored at least 50 points. So an 80-game season, if he averages 50 points a game, you obviously have to know he's going to score at least 50 more than half the time. So that much you kind of could guess. And he scored at least 40, just under 80% of their games. And he actually scored 60 points or more 14 times in that year. There are great players in this league that don't even have 14 60-point games in their entire career. This guy did it in one season. However, it is one season. We are talking about the greatest of all time, which should cover a career. That season alone, though, should really put him in the argument. If you disagree about that, he still did get 2 rings. He was a Finals MVP in 72. Here's another interesting fact about Chamberlain. Never fouled out of a game, ever. That's regular season or playoffs. He never once fouled out of a game.
Kobe or LeBron? Well, I mean, that's a tough one. I would say, in terms of dominance of the game of basketball at this stage, is LeBron. Championship-wise, Kobe Bryant. It is what it is. He's cursed as much as I am. And if you had to pick, between the two, that'd be a tough choice. I mean, but 5 beats 1.
And Bryant loving the feeling of being a 5-time champ.
Kobe was one of the most feared players in the history of the league, and he was the closest thing to Michael Jordan that we could see in terms of his tenacity and his competitiveness since Michael Jordan. Now, Kobe's 4th all-time in scoring. He's kind of right behind Karl Malone, and he's right above Michael Jordan. He finished his career with 5 rings and 7 trips to the NBA Finals. His last 2 rings, though, not only did he not have Shaq, he didn't have much. Pau Gasol was the only other All-Star that he had on his team, or the 08-09 season. The team that he beat was the Boston Celtics, and they had 3 All-Stars on their team. Now, one of the reasons why Kobe is not in this conversation, well, there's actually a couple reasons why he's not in that conversation. Number one, he's so much like Michael Jordan in how he played the game, how he approached the game, his competitive nature, that it's really hard to put him ahead of Michael because, well, Michael was kind of known for being that player first, and since he's in the conversation as much as he is, it's hard to squeeze Kobe in for that reason. The second is, Kobe took himself out of that conversation. I only saw it a couple times, but anytime someone asked Kobe if he was better than Michael Jordan, he immediately shut that down. Unlike LeBron James. LeBron James has openly said he thinks he's the greatest player of all time. But Kobe never wanted to be compared to Jordan. He always put Jordan above him. And again, for that reason, that's probably why he's not in the conversation. But you know what? He deserves to be. For everything that he accomplished in his career, for every reason that Michael Jordan is in the conversation, Kobe should be in that conversation. And to think it's just one ring that separates them, I think Kobe Bryant should definitely be in the conversation. He might even be number 1 in some people's books, and I wouldn't blame him for it.
The greatest player of modern times is largely considered to be Michael Jordan. Have you had any interaction with him? Yes, I think he's a great player, and I have the ultimate regard for him. He says to me one time, we were out in the middle of the golf course, he says, they just won a championship, okay? He says, you know, we're gonna go up your record. I said, which one? I said, well, you know, we won 11, but we won 8 straight. I don't think you'll live long enough to get either one of those. He says, but it's easy to win championships when you play. And so I said, well, think about it this way. When I was a rookie, there were 80 jobs in professional basketball. So a lot of good players didn't make that. I said, if there were only 12 teams, you couldn't have won that championship. He said, why? I said, because facts. He hit his open shot. Won the game. Well, if there were 12 teams in the league, he couldn't have made that shot. He said, why not? I said, because he'd been up in the stands.
Well, if you want stats, you got Wilt. However, if you want rings, you got Russell. There's no player in the history of the game that defines winning more than Bill Russell. He played in the NBA for 13 seasons. In those 13 seasons, he went to the NBA Finals 12 times and he won 11 rings. The only time he lost in a finals was in 1958 to the St. Louis Hawks. Russell won 8 straight championships from 59 to 66. And now you're probably wondering why he didn't win any finals MVPs. Well, that's just because they didn't have a final MVP award until 1969. And that was when Jerry West won it on the losing team. Now, where Wilt passed Russell was his stats. But Russell's really, his biggest strength was rebounding and defense. So in terms of rebounding, he's obviously one of the best. He's second all-time behind Wilt Chamberlain. He averaged double-digit rebounds every year that he played. He also averaged 20 or more rebounds in a season for 10 straight seasons. And Russell, like LeBron and Michael, made everybody around him better. No better evidence of that could be found except when in 1966, when the great Red Auerbach stepped down from coaching, Bill Russell was named head coach while he was still a player. And he was a player coach for 3 seasons. So not only was he the first African-American head coach in the NBA, he also was the only player coach to win a championship as a player and a coach. He actually won 2 rings the last 2 seasons of his career. And we talk about all of LeBron James's finals appearances and how many times he went in a row. I think it was like 8 in a row he went. You're talking about 13 seasons. He went to the NBA Finals 10 seasons in a row, and he went to the NBA Finals every year but 1 year that he actually played. In fact, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has said that he believes Bill Russell was the greatest player of all time.
That's high praise.
Number 33, when he burst on the international scene with the fold-out cover of Sports Illustrated. I was in high school and I wore number 33 because of Kareem. And he was just the most incredible player that I'd ever seen. He set such a standard of excellence, and his relentless search for perfection just established himself as this remarkable beacon, ideal of what a basketball player, what a human being could be.
The final entry in this list, I saved the one that I thought was the best. And not only can you make a strong argument that Kareem should be in the conversation, there is a strong argument that Kareem should be the greatest player of all time, especially if you take and extend that into his college days. Jabbar came in, played in Milwaukee. He won an NBA championship with Oscar Robertson. He actually won the Rookie of the Year in the 69-70 season. And he won, when the year that they won the title, he was the finals MVP. Now you go back to college. Jabbar came out of UCLA, played 3 seasons at UCLA, and this was back when freshmen just didn't play. It wasn't a tradition for freshmen to play. So he played for 3 seasons. In those 3 seasons at UCLA, he won 3 NCAA titles, and they went 88-2. 88-2 was his college record. And As for stats, he was the all-time leading scorer from the time that he retired in 1988 up until just last year when LeBron James finally passes him. From 69 to 75, he averaged 10-plus rebounds and over 20 points. For his career, he finished with 6 titles, just as many as Michael, 6 MVPs, and 2 of those he was the Finals MVP. I think that Jabbar gets left out because our biggest memory of him were his last 7 seasons when he was on the Showtime Lakers as the center. The focus was more on Magic because of the way that offense ran. Kareem was the center. It was a lot of fast break opportunities, so he would kind of get the rebound and then initiate that fast break. So he didn't get a lot of attention those last 7 seasons. He did play really late in life, so he wasn't the same player that he was kind of in the last couple of years that he played. He did get 5 rings with the Lakers, but he's not considered like the reason they won those 5 championships. So I think that's why Kareem gets the bad rap that he gets. Also, this whole GOAT debate has become very generational. You know, Michael Jordan tends to be the greatest of all time to the people of my generation, you know, but LeBron tends to be the greatest of all time to the people of this generation. During all that conversation, Kareem gets left out.